in Romans chapter 13. We looked at the first few verses there in that chapter last week, but this week I want us to continue. It is a different thought. And so I found that to be of great importance to us as we dive in here to Romans chapter 13. And really what convicted me that this might be a relevant message to us. As I pondered the question, I wonder what would happen if we were to ask our co-workers, our neighbors, or even a few strangers. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word Christian? Because for some, you might get a biblical answer, a Sunday school answer. But for others, it may not be so pleasant. I'm not sure we would all be pleased with some of the answers we receive. Especially in our culture today, there are a lot of negative ideas associated, unfortunately, with Christianity. And if you never needed proof, you could go onto Google today, and one of the tricks that Google does, because we've gotten so lazy as a society, is that Google will try and complete your thought. Used to, you had to be really calculative in how you Google searched something. Otherwise, the results would be skewed, and you wouldn't find what you were looking for. And so now they've gotten it to where they know that it's so important that you find what you're looking for that they will try and complete the thought for you. And where we find this is if you were to type something like, "Why are Christians so?" and not complete that sentence, then Google would try and complete the sentence for you by saying, and here are some of the results that I got. Why are Christians so intolerant? Why are Christians so mean? Why are Christians so arrogant? And then I thought, okay, let's not make it a question, let's make it a statement, right? So then I wrote, Christians are, and then my top results were hypocrites, crazy, ignorant, annoying. So Google compiles the most common things that other people have written. So don't, oh man, Google hates Christianity. Google compiles what everybody has already said and then said, well, this is the majority of what people are saying when they type this out, so maybe this is what you're trying to type out. And so it tries to jump ahead for us. Now there is a cultural element to these results. There are people who don't understand us. But if we're honest, there's also much that we've done to contribute to the reputation. There are things that we can do so that at least in our little circle, our workplace, our neighborhood, our friends, our families, that when people think about Christians, they automatically think on those things. And so I want to look at our key text today, what it's actually talking about, and how, thanks to its misuse, the actual meaning of this text is lost, in fact, in translation. And I'm talking about Romans chapter 13. And we're going to start in verse number 8. Now in Romans 13, 1 through 7, Paul dealt with how Christians are to respond to governing authorities. And that's important because of context. And we're going to get there in a minute. But in verse number 8, he says, "Owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law." So, Paul says in effect, there is one debt that you should never stop paying, and that is to love one another. And he continues in verse number 9. He says, "For the commandments, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not commit murder, you shall not steal, you shall not covet, and any other commandment are summed up in this word, you shall love your neighbor as yourself." My dad preached I don't know how many messages in his life that I actually was blessed enough to hear. But one of the most impactful ones that he ever gave was on this very passage. Because he said, if you could just fulfill that last one, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If you could just do that one, the other 9 are a whole lot easier. And you think, well, why is that? Well, because if you love your neighbor, are you going to commit adultery? If you love your neighbor, are you going to lie to them? If you love your neighbor, are you going to envy? Are you going to want what they have? If you're going to love your neighbor, are you going to bear false witness? Are you going to use the Lord's name in vain? No. To love the neighbor, just as Paul is saying here. All of these commandments are summed up in this one word. You shall love your neighbors as yourself. Paul is also referencing here something that Jesus said. A theologian once came to Jesus and asked him, which commandment was the greatest? And Jesus said the first is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind and strength. And the second is like, love your neighbor as yourself. And then the man asked the obvious question, who is my neighbor? And Jesus answered with the story of the Good Samaritan. I learned this in Sunday school, flannel graph Sunday school. I heard we're bringing it back. I'd love to hear it. But I learned it in flannel graph Sunday school where, the story about this man is robbed, he's beaten, he's left for dead, and he's in a bad spot, right? And Jewish leaders walk right on by him, and then another Jewish leader walks right by him, and then a Samaritan walks by and stops. And he helps the wounded man. He cares for him, pays for his care. And you think, oh, that's a nice story. But the problem is that we forget the word Samaritan. We hear the terminology Good Samaritan. In fact, we use it today. I'm just trying to be a Good Samaritan, right? If we see a car on the side of the road with a flat tire and we help them out or whatever, I'm just trying to be a Good Samaritan. And we don't even know what the word Good Samaritan means. To the Jew, in Jesus' time, this is an oxymoron. You can't say good and Samaritan in the same word. It doesn't make sense. What do you mean a good Samaritan? There are none that are good. Because there was constant strife between the two. And Jesus humbles them because he tells them in this story that this man who had been beaten and left for dead was passed by several Jewish people before eventually being stopped by a Samaritan, a person who you say is no good. They actually stopped and loved them. And then, so if that weren't enough, Jesus then asked this theologian, which one was the neighbor? The one who showed mercy? Or the ones that passed on by? And obviously the answer is the one who showed mercy. And Jesus says essentially that you need to go and do the same. Which again, such a provocative message to say you need to go and do the very thing that this good person in this society that you've shamed, you need to be more like them and be better than that. All of these commandments are ultimately about how we treat people. These are all ways of doing harm to another person. When we commit adultery, when we murder, steal, covet, all of these things bring harm to someone else. It doesn't just affect you, it affects countless lives. When someone goes in and they kill someone mercilessly in a drive-thru, the person who died isn't the only one that's affected. They're affected the worst in that they've lost their life. But now they have friends and they have family, they have coworkers, and people who for the rest of their life may be in grief over the loss of this life. And as much as hate can have such an impact on so many people, love has a greater impact. But yet the news only focuses on that because those are the stories we run to. Look what hate did to our society today. And we think, oh gosh. But can you imagine that love is even more impactful? And so Paul says that love fulfills the law. And then so is our responsibility. As Christians, it is our responsibility to love. It's not an option, it's not a characteristic of some Christians are this way, but not all of them, but that's okay. No, each and every one of us have the responsibility to love. You can say, well, Pastor, that's not part of my calling. That's a foreign language to me. We all may interact differently. We may be into different things. We may have different interests. Some may like to go fishing. Some may like to stay indoors. Some may like to watch movies. Some may like to go touch grass. At the end of the day, all those are characteristics, and that's fine. I welcome that. But what we all must be unified on is this love. And so an important sidebar to this message, which I hope doesn't take up my whole message, but as I was looking at this, I've heard this passage misused. And so if you had known that Romans 13:8 through 11 was going to be our main text today, you would think to yourself, if you've heard this text preached, you would think, oh, okay, so today's going to be about how if I'm in debt, I'm a sinner. And how debt is a sin, and none of us should ever be in debt because debt is a sin. And so if you've heard this passage preached for any length of time, the idea is that Romans 13:8 means Christians are never supposed to borrow money or have debt. Because the passage clearly says, owe no one anything. And I've heard this verse preached. And no, I'm not just preaching this because it's apropos of what we're going through with our building needs and stuff. And so please don't understand, there's no underlying message here where I'm trying to convince you that we need to go into $100,000 debt so that we can pay for the roof. That's not my intention here. But I need you to understand that Romans 13:8 is not talking about debt. Because I've heard this when churches are in need of something, and we say, okay, maybe the church should take out a loan. Like, oh, Romans 13:8. I've also heard where people judge other Christians because, oh, well, we couldn't afford it, so we put it on the card, and we think, you're a servant to MasterCard and to Visa, and that's your God now. And it sounds spiritual because the idea of being financially responsible does sound like a biblical concept, and it is. But that's not what this passage is in fact teaching. Romans 13:8 is not a prohibition against financial debt. And the reason why I know this is when you go back to verse number 7, Paul essentially says, give to everyone what you owe them. Tells them to pay taxes and government fees to those who collect them, and give respect and honor to those who are in authority. When we were first struck with this business license fee, I could have proposed that I guess we go up in a riot over a $300 licensing fee. But I go back to this passage where it says, give to everyone what you owe them. If it's what we owe them, that's what we owe them. Do I think it's stupid? Yeah, a little bit. But I also want to follow the scripture in the idea that I don't want to be at war with my own government unless I have to be. I want to avoid that at all costs. That's also a biblical principle. And so he's talking, though, about the responsibilities. He then says, right after he says, give to everyone what you owe them, pay your taxes, give your government fees, give respect and honor to those who are in authority. The next thing he then says is, owe no man anything. The idea is that you never, the idea is not that you may never have financial obligation. The idea is that you should fulfill what you owe. Don't sign up for a car payment that you know you can't make and then let it go to where they have to come and collect it. That is exactly what he's talking about here. Paul is talking about the responsibilities that we have toward other people. It's not just financially. If you owe no man anything, means absolutely no financial obligation whatsoever, then the moment a business has an account payable, it's then a sin. Doesn't make any sense. Anybody in the business world knows that if you use a credit card and you don't pay it off immediately, you're in sin. Or if a church has a mortgage, the church is in sin. That's absurd. This does not mean debt is wise, though. Just because Romans 13:8 isn't teaching that borrowing money is sinful doesn't mean that the Bible teaches that debt is wise. From a biblical perspective, it is foolish to borrow money so that we can live above our means. The Bible doesn't necessarily call that sinful, but it does call it foolish. A wise person lives below his means. Proverbs 21:20 tells us that the wise have health and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get. If you're going paycheck to paycheck, it might be because you spend whatever you get. And so while you continue to pray and ask God for more, the Lord's trying to tell you, I've given you everything you already need. You don't simply want your income and expenses to balance perfectly. You want to live below your means so that you have something left over. There's a generation that's getting lost now that when they go on, they have something to give the next generation. And so you have people not just with life insurance policies, but property used to be a part of the American dream. To own property. That was worth some people dying for. They would come over to this country, if not just for religious freedom, but to have the freedom to own something. And now it's, well, I'll just rent for the rest of my life. And sure, there have been things in crutches that have kept, I don't own property. But there have been things that have made it a lot harder now to own than it was 20 years ago. My parents bought a house for, I think it was $150,000 that if she sold today would be sold for $500,000. And it's a 30-something-year-old house. And so the ratio of how much money was made then to how much the house costs then is not the same as it is now. And so it's important to not only just live within your means, but to even allow some to excess. So the question isn't simply, can I make the payment? The question is, who am I trusting? Who am I trusting when I get into this financial strain? Am I trusting God? Am I trusting MasterCard? Am I trusting God? Am I trusting my own ability to make it up? Most of us have been trained to say, if God comes through, great. But if He doesn't come through by next Tuesday, I'll put it on the credit card. Not quite the kind of faith that God is looking for. We confuse wants with needs. One of the reasons we get into debt is because we don't understand the difference between what we need and what we want. Our culture is constantly telling us that we need things that we simply want, and what's fascinating is how much of what we consider poverty today would have been unimaginable luxury a couple hundred years ago. And I wrote some of these things down and then I laughed as I looked over my notes later because I wasn't thinking about it. But you've got a flushing toilet, we're down one. So that, whatever. You got a flushing toilet, you've got air conditioning, okay, well, maybe we went on that. You've got a car, okay, most of us have a car in this room, some of us have multiple cars. You've got a phone that can tell you where you can go anywhere in the world and how long it'll take you to get there. You've got entertainment available 24 hours a day. This was unheard of, even as a child. Aurora when we traveled to Phoenix. We put in a movie. She watches the whole movie on the TV that's up in the roof of the car. And then as soon as it's over, put in another movie. What did I do as a kid? I don't know. We traveled to Oklahoma and back in a single cab pickup truck. I don't know what I did for the hours and hours we were on the road. Slept, I guess. I don't know. So it was unimaginable luxury, even for a 4-year-old. But I will say this. Borrowing money can be wise when it produces something of value. And so no, if you need to get into debt in order to get ahead into doing something, see, it isn't foolish or wrong to borrow money in order to make money. It's kind of a Joe Biden trait to, we got to spend money before we make it. So I know some of us may not agree with what I'm trying to say here, but a mortgage, for example, it can be a reasonable financial decision. because you want a nice home for your family. But how many of us have $1 million sitting in our pocket? I sure don't. A business may borrow money to expand. You want your business to flourish. We've seen, just since I've been here, we've seen the tire place grow, I think, double in size, triple in size since I've been here. And no doubt that was done not on the back of just, well, we just had a couple million sitting in the account, so we thought we'd go ahead and open a new store. No, there was probably loans done and some business done with the bank, no doubt. The question is whether the debt is wise. Paul tells us that there is one debt, and this is what he's saying in Romans 13. So there's a whole other message out there about debt. And maybe, I can get Megan's Uncle Dave to come and give us a lecture on financial debt. That's a joke. She's not related. If he was, that would be nice. But debt is a biblical concept that we could look at. But this isn't what Romans 13 is talking about. Paul tells us there is one debt that we should never stop paying. And it's something that money cannot buy, and that is love. And the fact that this verse has been misused and mistreated so many times, it doesn't surprise me then that one of the things that gets misunderstood and mistreated and gets left at times undone, and that is to the Christian, to love. And so why is love so important? The absence of biblical love nullifies everything else I can do for God. If I'm not loving the way I should, let's look at what Paul says to the church in Corinth in his first letter. 1 Corinthians 13:1, he says, "If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal." Now, some of you may have no idea what this verse says. In other words, I can speak beautifully, I can preach, I can pray, I can say all the right things. But I know what this is talking about. When Paul says, I'm just like a banging gong or a cymbal. If you don't know what it's like, have my child come over to your house, get bored, and then in about 10 minutes, she'll find something to bang on. And guess what? I don't feel love from her when all I hear is clanging and banging. Right? Eventually, it's Aurora, 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 right? Stop! And we often see this, to my wife's chagrin, we often see this at the dinner table. Because what do you do at dinner table but stare at everybody at the dinner table? How boring. But it was something I did as a kid, and it's something that I want to continue with my kids. Is sit around and talk as a family, pray together, eat together. But she gets bored, and so what does she do? She turns into my dad. My dad would sit, and my dad's drum set was the plate, the cup, the bowl that would be sitting there, and his drumsticks were the fork and the knife, or the fork and the spoon. And used to drive my mom crazy. I would join in with Dad, and we would sound like Tarzan. And then my mom would be like, "Bo, you stop it. We gotta pray, right?" Mom always used prayer as a transition. And then if it happened after prayer, it was like, "Let's pray again." And so with Aurora, that's what she does, clanging and banging on everything that she can get, because she gets so bored. And I bring that, and this is exactly what I thought of when I read this. But man, I could speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but if I do not love, I'm just like my kid, clanging and banging on everything I can get my hands on. It's just noise. And I loved this event that we went to yesterday, but I know it, and I can feel it when I meet other people, the Christian people that have their booths, and you get to talking, and I can see it's just noise. I'm here to check off a list. I'm here to hand a kid a stack of crayons and say, "Next." That's wild to me. You don't even make eye contact with my kid as she walks by your booth. And you just toss it in her backpack like a conveyor belt system. It's just noise. But one of the things that I loved, at least at our booth, I'm not saying we do everything right, but I feel like we did it right yesterday, was that we made eye contact. We had Aurora involved. At one point she was our star, and she was out there passing things out. And then at one point it became a guessing game as to which glue stick each kid would pick. Are they going to pick the purple one, the yellow one, the orange one? Because the kids, they don't care if it's Elmer's or if it's from China. All they care about is what color they want. And there was one little girl, she could care less if this was Elmer's. I want the yellow one. And so what is Alan to do at that point? No, you've got the orange and you need to live with it. Again, just noise. But of course, yeah, go for it. And we make those connections because it's not just noise. Love is an action. It's not just an emotion that we just put on a shirt and say, see, now I'm loving. I hope that we can see how important love is. Because in verse 2 and 3, he continues and he says, and if I have prophetic powers and understand all the mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all the faith, so as to remove mountains, not just move them, but remove them completely, but I have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Do you see how important love is? Romans 13 says love fulfills the law. 1 Corinthians 13 says that without love, everything else I do for God is ultimately empty. That's why it matters. We can check off everything on the list. Oh, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this for God. But if we do all of it and we do not love, we're wasting our time. This isn't stained glass Christian language. This isn't, I guess I should try to be a little bit more loving. This is a fundamental to how we represent Jesus Christ. If you do not love, you do not represent Him. It's that simple. Biblical love is an action, not a feeling. So our culture has a very different definition of love than the Bible does. Our culture says that love is primarily a feeling. I love you means I feel warmly towards you. I don't love you anymore means I don't have these feelings anymore. But biblical love is not primarily about what you feel. Biblical love is about what you do. That's why the Bible can command us to love our enemies. If love were simply a feeling, then that command would make no sense. If I love my enemy, he's not my enemy anymore. If I have feeling of adoration toward him. The Bible isn't saying develop warm, fuzzy feelings about your enemy. That's not what the Bible preaches. It's saying do the loving thing. That's what the Bible says. You don't have to feel loving to act lovingly. There were some interesting characters that walked by our booth. It's not up to me to say, well, this person looks shady. I'm not going to give them a glue stick. Right? That's absurd. I'm not going to have a conversation with this person because they don't fit the mold. That's why someone can't simply say, I left my marriage because I don't love the person anymore. Maybe I'm stepping on toes, but what does that mean biblically? It means I've decided that my feelings are more important than my commitment. You made a commitment to the person some of you are sitting next to in this room. You didn't just say, well, I feel all warm and fuzzy when they enter the room. That's maybe how it started, but that's not where it should still be. Biblical love isn't about putting myself at the center. It's about choosing to act for the good of another person. That's why Jesus commands us to love our enemies. That's why Jesus tells us to love our neighbors. And that's why Paul tells us that love fulfills the law. So in closing, what happens? What happens when someone Googles, why are Christians so... Maybe we can't change what the world thinks about Christianity as a whole. Maybe we can't change what somebody across the country thinks about Christianity. I don't know, but I may not be able to change the world, but I can influence what the people around me think. I can't change what celebrities think, but I could show the city of La Habra that I love her. There's been a popular saying, I think it probably went into a song and became on everyone's hat and t-shirt lately, but I would love to make heaven crowded, right? I think there's even an artist right now that's on like the Heaven Crowded tour. But I would love to make heaven crowded, but it starts with making sure hell loses just one. And that's on us. I'm not asking you to change the world. The Lord's not saying, hey, go out there and change the whole world in one night. But if you were to look at His commandments simply put, you could focus on one. It starts with one. The question is who is our one? Is our one someone that one of us might have had a conversation with yesterday? Is our one somebody at work that we speak to every day? And maybe you do have an affection for them. You love them. They're great. I love being around them. They make work so much fun and they make life better. But do they know Christ? Because if you want to sit here and say, oh, I love this coworker. That's great. I love having coworkers that I love. I don't have coworkers now. Lonely business. But it makes life easier. But if you want to sit here and tell me that you love them, but you don't know if they know Christ, do you love them? Because when you tell me you love them, but you don't know if they know Christ, and you're telling me that you feel warm and fuzzy about them. I want you, the Lord wants you to truly love your neighbor. Not just feel warm and fuzzy, but to have a biblical understanding of what love is. Imagine one person to believing those people, those Christians, the people at Lighthouse, those people are loving. And you get to be the source. There's people at the Green Hills Church here across town, they've never met any of you. And yet they were introduced to your church through me this weekend when we were getting things ready the day before. I got introduced as, and this is the pastor at Lighthouse. Their church has helped us greatly in putting this event together, and they're going to be donating some 2,000 glue sticks tomorrow. And so their impression of you is that, man, this is a hard-working group of people. And all that comes from one face. I could also go down to a restaurant here right after church, complain about my food being cold, complain how pricey it is, be a nuisance, and that waitress thinks, as I wear this shirt, I am never going to be a part of anything that he has to do with. And so in one day I can make the right decision and represent the Lord and His church well, and in another instance I can be selfish and self-centered and choose not to love and choose only love to be warm and fuzzy. And so if you don't make me feel warm and fuzzy, I'm going to be nothing but cold and prickly. And at the end of the day, it's a choice. You're not here simply because God wants you to get to heaven. I love our hymn books, and I'm not here to shame them, but there's a lot of songs in this book that talk about heaven. And the reason for that is because so many of them were written at a time where there was a Great Depression, quite literally. And so the one thing that they had their eyes and their hearts fixated on was what life was going to be after this. Because that was all they had. And there are days, I know, where it feels like that's all you have. It's to sing a song about when we all get to heaven. What a day of rejoicing that will be. But I want to encourage you, friends, that this life isn't just all about waiting for the next one. You're here for no other reason than to love others the way He loved you. You're still here because He has a desire for you to love your neighbor. And He's giving you the opportunity to love your neighbor, love your coworker, love your actual neighbor that lives next to you. To love your family that you're estranged from, that you haven't spoke to, that you're angry about, that there is a certain injustice in. He's calling you to love them. Not feel warm and fuzzy, but to love them. Hell lost the day that Christ arose. And so we need to quit giving the enemy the victory when the cross has already won the war. We need to quit sitting back and just waiting for Jesus to come. When I wonder if it's not Jesus who is waiting on us to get our act together before He returns. Do you realize that He could be tarrying His coming, and that tarrying could be a mercy to you? Because He's thinking, no, if I let you come home now, there's so much work to be done, you'd be chastised for that, and you'd have to face that in eternity. And so I'm trying to give you a chance to do the right thing, to do the loving thing. We need to let people around us see something different in us. In some churches, they market better. I looked around, I took notes, as I do anytime there's an event like this, and I think, wow, look at that. They've got this beautiful $700-800 custom Easy Up with the custom table cover. They've got all this merch out. They got water bottles and magnets and t-shirts and pens and all this cool stuff, and all the kids are grabbing it. And they've got a marketing team. We walked by one table. I told Megan about it. I was like, I wanted to sign this kid up for our church. We were walking by one table, and I just went by and I grabbed one of their little things that showed like service times and all that. Just kind of curious what the layout looked like. And as I'm standing there and I'm looking at it, this kid walks up to me. He couldn't have been more than 5th or 6th grade. And he walks up and he goes, well, as you can see there on that card that you have, you'll see where our church starts. We start at 8, 10, and 12. And if you join us next week, we're having Popsicle Sunday, and the Sunday after that, Back to Church Sunday, and every gift, or every guest in the church will receive a gift, and one of those guests could be you. 5th and 6th grade. And I've been in missionary Baptist churches that say, no one under 18 can serve in the church. And so some churches market better. I don't want to be a church that markets better. This city already has that. And I can get into the comparison trap and constantly trying to be a better marketable church. I want to look like the cause. I want to look like, Green Hills. I want to look like the Presbyterians. I can do that all day and never be like what I'm comparing to. I don't want to be a more marketable church. I want to be a loving church. Because there is nothing easier to market. There is nothing easier to sell than love. Because it sells itself. Because true love, the love of God, the love of Christ, it's free. There's no catches. There's no little asterisk next to it. There's nothing that you have to pay for or sign up to. You just get to embrace it and experience it. And I pray that when you come to the house of God, you come not so that you can be loved, but you come to experience His love. Because one of the ways that we can experience it isn't by being loved, but it's by loving others. I went home yesterday and I was tired, and I was hot, and my shirt was covered in sweat. But I'll tell you what, I wasn't tired. Because spiritually, you get energized. There's something about truly loving people that energizes you, revives you. It's good for the soul. And even if you sit back, Brother Rick, and just watch, sometimes just sitting back and watching the love of God take place revives the soul. So to say, well, I couldn't stand that long, that's why I didn't come. Well, you missed out. You missed out. And I just love that God's people, I love it when I see God's people, the light comes on and they just get it. It's not about trying to be like something else. It's not about trying to do something that we've never done before. It's about doing the thing that He's instructed us to do, and that is love thy neighbor. I pray that this message makes sense to you. I pray that it opens your heart and opens your eyes. I know I preached it ad nauseum about it. It starts with one. And maybe it didn't make sense then, and hopefully maybe the Lord made it click now. Who is your one? And you say, when are you going to get off this message? When you start living it? When someone walks through the doors of this church and they're like, I want to be baptized. I'll go, well, I guess we can move on. But it starts with one. It starts with one, and I want to know who your one is. The Lord wants you to know who your one is. I need you to be praying for that person. I need you to be doing whatever it takes. Put yourself aside. Do what is inconvenient. Go the extra mile. Do whatever you must. What is it worth to you that someone know Christ today? I didn't even get to go to camp. But I had a bunch of friends that did this last week. And when I read that one of my buddies' kids came to know Christ, man, that just made me get up better this morning. Because just to know that hell lost another one is enough for me to get up and go, you know what? Today could be the day where more come to know Him. If a kid can come to know Jesus on a Thursday surrounded by mosquitoes, then guess what? Someone can come to know Him today. Someone can come to know Him at school. Someone can come to know Him at the coffee shop. Someone can come to know Him wherever you work and are, wherever you reside, at the bank, wherever it is. God can show His love through you, wherever you stand. The question is, are we letting Him? Why are Christians so loving? That would be the reputation I would want us to have. Why is Lighthouse such a loving church? What a beautiful problem. What a beautiful world. And it can be attained if we take it serious. Father God, I thank You for Your word today, and I pray that this message pierce the hearts and minds of everyone here and everyone listening, maybe at home or on the road. God, I just pray that we just take Your message seriously. That we understand the levity of loving one another and loving the world. Not celebrating it, not saying that it's okay to be in sin and we don't care, but to show them that, like, hey, listen, I know that you think all of this that the world is offering you is going to somehow bring you peace. But we serve a God today that His love brings about a peace that passes all understanding. Father, I just pray that You make it real to us. I pray that the ones that are in our lives, that You just help us to see them through the lens of Your love and through Your eyes. Help us to see the need that is right in front of us. Give us the courage and the strength to be who You've called us to be. We are so much more than our occupations. We are so much more than our titles. We are children of the King. Help us to see that this week as we step into our daily lives. Help us to change the world around us. But we know, Lord, that it starts with one. We thank You and we love You. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for your attention. I invite you back this afternoon.